Welcome, everyone, to episode 19 of the Worldstone Keep Podcast. Since this is episode 19, that means our next show, episode 20, will be live, and as of now is set to be this Friday, March 25th at 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you live elsewhere, as I'm sure many of you do, and you want to know what time that will be in your neck of the woods, you can check the blog, theworldstonekeep.wordpress.com, and I'll put a conversion table up on there for all of you. With me on the show is my usual consortium of casters, Jordan, Ken, and Dan. Jordan covers lore, Ken covers news, and Dan covers video, the likes of which can be seen on our new YouTube channel, but more on that later. Judging by the show notes in front of me, this should be a short show. This week we have the usual lore section, followed by a bit of news, and that is followed by a tiny bit of community feedback, and then we'll close out the show. So, without any more nonsense from me, let's jump into some lore. What do we have this week, Jordan?
All right. In our last stopping point, you had the sailor rescuing the boy, getting off the third cog while the other two were on fire. There was a mysterious explosion. You're not really quite sure what's going on there, but at this point as well, Cholik, the priest, has actually opened the way to the Black Road. What's interesting here is that you have all these simultaneous effects going on. Apparently the Big Bang effect that just shut off part of the mountain side was actually part of the gateway opening. When the giant gate actually opens itself, you have this great wind come out, and there are all of these green insects flying around. And what they do is they, just beeline it for people, burrow themselves in people's bodies and eat them alive. And so you see all these slaves and mercenaries and priests and everyone else just getting picked clean in a matter of a minute, maybe two. And Cholik, knowing there's really no going back now, walks through the gate. And you have a lot of interesting imagery here. And when he steps through, he sees a light down the way, and he hears Cabraxis' voice in his head, speaking to him, telling him, more or less interrogating him at the start, I would say. And all he has to go by is the silver starlight, the great overhang amidst the bridge, and he's looking around trying to figure out what it is he's actually standing on. When he does, he realizes that it's nothing but human bones, and they're not mortared in place, they're actually crisscrossing, and he could actually feel the thing sway a little bit. And when Cabraxis is talking to him, he realizes that it's still a test. He's still not sure if this is going to end well for him or not. And so Cholik is essentially bartering with him, even though he doesn't have much left to barter with. He knows that the spell effect that he had cast earlier is about to wear off. And as he's continuing on the path, he's like, well, you're a demon. Yeah, he's asking him, are you afraid? He's like, well, I'm as afraid as I would from falling off a high cliff, And the whole time he's kind of having this inner dialogue in his own head. He's going, well, demons use fear like a tool. So they despise people who are fearful. And so he knows if he wants to come out of this ahead, he has to essentially act the part. And he's like, well, if I die now, what's it to me? There's no going back now. Yeah, but I'm a demon. I can make you die for centuries. And all of a sudden he's like, oh, I didn't think about that. That's not good. It's like,
Rude.
Exactly.
It's like, oh, yeah.
And like, oh, anyways, moving along. He's like, yeah, I can help you be free of this prison. And he's like, okay. So he's walking along, and he's really starting to feel his age, and he's starting to feel the bridge sway, and he's about to collapse. And Cabraxis is like, well, are you going to continue? Will you go back? And he thinks for just a moment, and then all of a sudden the bridge behind him collapses. The whole section, he's like, let that be your first lesson. I'll be your strength when you have none. And so he's going along, and he sees these elbow joints along the path, and wherever there are actually these trees. But they're very strange looking. You have these fruit, and as he gets closer, he sees that they're actually human faces. And they're just a crescendo of different sounds of weeping or fear or anguish or, just basically tormented voices of the damned in these, odd little fruit trees.
Creepy.
Yeah. And he's going, and of course, again, the whole time Cabraxis is talking in his head is like, don't stop now, would you become one of the fruits of the tree? It's like, okay, I gotta keep walking.
You gotta wonder where he comes up with this stuff.
Yeah, it's like I say, section is very cool, and when he finally does reach the end, you get a detailed description of what Cabraxis is actually looking like, sitting on his throne, and he figures him to be about twice as tall as a man, as much as 15 feet tall, massively broad body with black flesh, marbled with blue fire that burned and ran through him. His face was horrid, crafted of hard planes and rudimentary features, 2 inverted triangles, no nose but black pits where nostrils would be, and a lipless gash of a mouth filled with yellow fangs. Writhing poisonous vipers sprouted from his head, all of them beautiful, cool crystal colors of a rainbow. Do you know of the Black Road? The demon asked, leaning close. All the taunting had left his voice. Yes, Cholik gasped. Are you prepared to face what lies on the Black Road? Yes. Then do so. And Cabraxis reached forward, taking Cholik's head between his huge 3-fingered hands. The demon's talon bit into the old priest's head, driving into his skull. Cholik's senses swam, his eyes teared as he stared into the demon's monstrous visage and tasted Cabraxis' foul breath. Before he knew he was doing, Cholik screamed. The demon only laughed, then breathed fire over him.
Damn.
Yeah, and this is kind of interesting.
Well.
Surprisingly, it actually did go as planned for him. Cabraxis does actually bestow him with power, and when he comes back out, he looks like a 40-year-old man with a mix of black and gray hair. And one thing that did happen, the pirates were intending to, betray Cholik for past discretions, you might say. And when Rythan actually arrived, you had this scene after he comes out of the doorway. And so, he plans to kill the priest and take whatever it is that they found. And the demon actually walks out as well. All of a sudden, you have the insects devouring people. You have the bones that are picked clean coming to life, animated as skeletons. And so Cabraxis is tempting them, saying, you know what? I'm the way. If you want to be forgiven of your sins, come to me now. And so a lot of the pirates are saying, okay, you win, buddy, I'm coming over. And Rythan's not really the guy to give up. So what he does is he, acts like he's playing nice, and as soon as he's close enough, he takes his sword and he stabs straight into the middle of Cabraxis. And, just really jams it hard into his stomach and twists the blade. And he screams for a minute, tell that the sword is actually enchanted with something, and the jewels in the hilt glow bright for, it's basically a fire thing. Then he pretty much gains his control back, and he just looks mildly discomforted. And he takes his hand and he puts it over the captain's head and literally torches him alive, like the entire top half of his body down to cinders.
Dude.
Yeah.
Gnarly.
Cool.
And a little bit before this, or during that same time frame, the crack team is escaping with the boy, and the boy's struggling. He's trying to get a word out edgewise, and he knows that he has to tell them that they're looking for Cabraxis. All of a sudden the boy really does believe that there must be something there. And so Derek doesn't want to let him go. He's just like, no, dude, we just risked our lives and everything else. I don't believe in demons. This is trash. We're going back. And he's like, after all the troubles in Tristram, I think my uncle, the king, would take a pretty concerted interest in knowing if there was a demon here. And if you take me back and we don't find out, I'm going to tell him that. And he's like, ah. And he tries to, kind of muscle and say, oh, yeah? Well, you're going either way. And, just really serious, and looks him in the eyes like, damn, he's not buying it. Okay. So he's like, okay, you guys are taking the boy and going back. Matt, his friend, of course, volunteers, and a few other people do. So they go back to check the situation out. Boy's like, I need to go too. I can identify the demon. He's like, no, the king would not like the fact that you came along. And I think I'd know a demon if I saw him. It's like, all right, fine. Gosh. So their little, even smaller crack team now goes back, braves into the depths of the city, and are at this rocky outcrop overlooking the scene with the pirates and the demon. And all the other team has already fled. It's just Derek and Matt. Matt's constantly tugging on his sleeve like, okay, we saw the demon. Let's get the hell out of here. Come on, dude. This is crazy. It's like, you know why you never hear about these stories? Because people don't freaking make it. And once everything is said and done there, they're spotted, there are skeletons behind them, and they just take off running. And the whole time, those insects are chasing them, the skeletons are chasing them, and once they reach close to the entranceway and they start to get hit and pelted by the strong rain and wind, you can see all of the insects start to pop and just kind of explode into little green flames. And it's because they're not really accustomed to the world. Whatever magic held them bound was wearing off. But the skeletons were still chasing after them like no tomorrow. You just hear silent as the grave, no voices, just the constant clodding at their feet. And so they race on out, knowing that their only shot is actually to jump in the river from the cliffside. And Derek's foot gets grabbed. He instinctively, after falling, kicks the thing off, and Matt actually picks him up and throws him over the ledge. And as he's falling backwards into the river, he's looking up, reaching for his friend, who, despite trying to jump off, has been grabbed himself and is falling short. And you hear these crunching sounds as he's falling. And Derek swims for a little bit, trying to keep his head above water and find out what happened to Matt. And he feels him, underneath the water, and he's just completely limp, and he's, locked him in place, holding him, and there's one of them, even though the skeletons can't swim, they don't have any buoyancy, one of them still has a hold of his leg. So the whole time, Derek is, with the last bit of his strength, is trying to keep both of them above water and constantly sinking under. And Maldron and the other team are just downstream waiting, and finally catch hold, and yanks Derek up by his hair, the easiest thing to grab on a drowning victim, and yanks him back up, gets him onto the little raft that they have, trying to pull Matt up. They're still struggling. It's like, what is that? And he's like, you got this situation going on down there, and the thing jumps out of the water as though it were going to bite the dude's throat, and Maldron just calmly picks up his warhammer and smashes the skull in.
Ooh.
It's like, no, not today.
Nice.
And finally, Derek's looking down. He's like, another of the crewmates is like, I'm sorry, he didn't make it. And he looks down, and he already knew that he had a wound on his head, but he was already dead and cold and lifeless on the boat. And yeah, that's a good stopping point for today.
Yeah, I've actually got a couple questions I've just got a couple questions about that. Did it discuss much about the trees? Like, because he taunted him about the trees. Like, are you going to become the trees? Are those like the people who have taken this path and failed, or were they just an illusion?
I am mostly certain that they are real people. I imagine that during the time when Cabraxis was in power, that the fate of those who took the Black Road, who were tempted by him and his religion, ended up being nothing more than food, as it were.
Yeah.
And
okay.
that's essentially what a lot of demons are going to do, is just feed off of humanity in some way or another.
And question number 2, do the books discuss much about sort of the nature of undead in the world of Sanctuary, like what they are, where they come from, what, sort of their, I guess, ecology?
I think the main thing there is that undead exist through magic. The magic that animates them depends on who's doing it. So on the one hand, you have the necromancers, and on the other hand, you have demons. On a third case, which probably very, very few people know, is that angels do it as well. It happened in the Sin Wars, when Tyrael actually took over Achilleos when he was animated. So yeah. I think it's also one of the prime reasons why necromancers are so hated and feared, is because people generally associate that sort of thing with demons. But it really depends on how much energy you put into the process. So you could have, a huge army if you could do it, if you had enough power to do it. Or you could have a smaller group. So it's how smart do I want them to be? How many do I want to do? How long will it take, and how long will they last? So those are the kind of factors you'd have to keep in mind if you were going to summon an undead army.
All right. All right.
Cool. Is that all the questions you got?
Yeah, those are the questions I've got from that.
Alrighty.
One other thing that I'd mention, and there are a couple different pages in the book that really emphasize this, is that you can't really kill demons. Like,